The wire was hot. I could feel the heat bleeding through the electrical tape wrapped around the toggle switch I'd bolted to the dashboard of the Dodge WC-52. It wasn't standard issue. Nothing about this rig was standard issue. Outside, the night air was thick with the smell of wet pine and the distinct metallic tang of impending snow. We were 300 yards from the German line, hidden in a dense thicket of trees just north of the Remagen bridgehead. My breathing was shallow, condensing on the cold windshield glass. Beside me, Corporal Miller was shaking, not from the cold, but from the realization of what we were sitting on. We had 12 M8 aircraft rockets, high explosive, 4.5-inch diameter, welded to a steel rack in the bed of a 3/4-ton truck. The suspension was groaning under the weight. The manual said these rockets belonged under the wing of a P-47 Thunderbolt, fired at 300 miles an hour. It said firing them from a stationary vehicle would incinerate the crew or flip the chassis. We were about to find out if the manual was right. A flare went up over the ridge, bathing the muddy road in a sickly, oscillating yellow light. I froze. Miller froze. If they saw the silhouette of the truck, the MG-V2s in that concrete pillbox up the hill would turn us into Swiss cheese before I could flip the switch. The flare hissed, suspended in the dark, then slowly drifted down, sizzling out in the wet underbrush. Darkness returned. I looked at the luminous dial of my watch. 0200 hours. The infantry was pinned down in the valley below, waiting for us to crack the nut that artillery couldn't reach. It was a reinforced observation post, dug deep into the bedrock, controlling the only road forward. We were the can opener. I adjusted the elevation crank I'd stolen off a wrecked mortar site. "Ready?" I whispered. Miller just nodded, gripping the door handle. I exhaled, feeling the vibration of my own pulse in my fingertips, and flipped the switch. There was no recoil like a cannon, just a sudden, violent hiss that sounded like the world's largest sheet of canvas tearing in half. The cab filled with blinding light as the first salvo of 4 rockets left the tubes. The heat washed over us, singing the hair on my arms even through the winter coat. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The truck rocked back on its springs, the suspension complaining as the weight left the bed. I watched the tracers of the rockets arc through the night, burning red lines into the darkness, straight toward the concrete slit on the hillside. Most people think of war as a series of loud bangs, but when you're the one pulling the trigger on something experimental, something you built with your own hands in a muddy barn 3 days prior, you don't hear the bang. You hear the mechanics. You hear the sizzle of the electrical arc. You smell the ozone and the burning propellant. And you feel the terrifying uncertainty of whether you're a genius or a dead man. The first rocket hit the berm just below the slit. The second and third went straight through the aperture. The explosion wasn't a sharp crack. It was a deep, resonant thud that you felt in your stomach more than you heard with your ears. The hillside seemed to lift up, suspend in the air for a fraction of a second, and then collapse inward. "Go! Move it, Frank!" Miller screamed. I slammed the Dodge into reverse, the tires spinning in the slush before biting into the gravel. We had to scoot. The Germans called it silent thunder later, or so the prisoners said. They called it that because we'd coast in with the engine off, unleash hell, and be gone before the echo died away. But in that moment, backing blindly down a logging trail with smoke pouring off the rocket tubes in the back, I didn't feel like thunder. I felt like a mechanic from Kansas who had just gotten away with murder. We hit the main road, and I gunned the engine, the trusty Dodge roaring as we put distance between us and the crater we'd just made. That was the first time we used it. It wouldn't be the last. I wasn't supposed to be an inventor. I was supposed to be a squad leader in the infantry. But the war has a way of finding your hidden talents and squeezing them until something useful comes out. Back home, before the world caught fire, I worked at a fabrication shop in Wichita. We fixed combine harvesters, welded broken axles on tractors, and sometimes, when the boss wasn't looking, we'd soup up old Ford coupes for the dirt track races on Saturday nights. I learned to weld before I learned to drive. I learned that you can fix almost anything with a torch, a hammer, and enough patience. When I enlisted, the Army saw mechanic on my aptitude test and tried to put me in the motor pool. I fought it. I wanted to be on the line. I wanted to do my part face to face. I thought that was where the honor was. I was young. I was stupid. By late 1944, the honor had worn off, replaced by the deep, grinding fatigue that settles into your bones and never really leaves. We were in the Hurtgen forest then, a place where the trees were shattered matchsticks and the ground was a mixture of mud, pine needles, and blood. We were losing guys every day to fortified positions, bunkers made of reinforced concrete that our 37mm anti-tank guns just bounced off of. We needed air support, but the weather was always socked in. Fog, snow, rain. The planes couldn't fly. We were stuck, bleeding out yard by yard against an enemy that was dug in like ticks on a hound dog. It was during a lull in the fighting that I saw the crashed P-47. It had come down in a field behind our lines, belly landed in the snow. The pilot had walked away, but the bird was done. I went out there with a couple of guys to scavenge for cigarettes or rations in the cockpit. That's when I saw them. The tubes. 3 clustered under each wing. The rockets were still in them, unfired. The pilot had crashed with a full load. I stared at those tubes for a long time. I ran my hand over the cold steel. They were simple, really. Just a tube and a firing circuit. No recoil mechanism needed because the rocket is self-propelled. I looked at the mud-caked Jeep parked nearby, then back at the plane. A gear turned in my head. A gear that hadn't turned since I was back in Wichita trying to figure out how to mount a V8 on a grain thresher. I grabbed my knife and started cutting the wiring harness. "Sarge, what the hell are you doing?" Miller asked, looking nervously toward the front lines. "Improvising," I muttered. "Go find me a wrench. A big one." That night, we didn't sleep. We towed the rocket tubes back to a barn we were using as a billet. I found a welding rig in the back of a maintenance truck. The maintenance officer, a lieutenant named Kowalski, caught me. I thought I was getting court-martialed for sure. He looked at the tubes, looked at the truck, and then looked at me. "Sullivan," he said, "if you blow up my truck, I'll shoot you myself." Then he handed me a box of welding rods and walked away. That was the green light. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. We spent the next 48 hours cutting, welding, and wiring. We took a Dodge WC-52, the workhorse of the Army, and stripped the canvas off the back. I fabricated a frame using angle iron scavenged from a bombed-out bridge. It had to be sturdy enough to hold the weight, but light enough not to make the truck top-heavy. The trickiest part was the elevation. Rockets drop fast. You have to aim high. I rigged a hand crank system using parts from a jack and a bicycle chain. It was ugly. It looked like something a junkman would throw together. But it swiveled, and it locked. We loaded the rockets. The M8 is a nasty piece of work. 4.5 inches of steel and high explosives. The warhead alone weighed nearly 5 pounds. The fuse was sensitive. Handling them was like carrying a crate of venomous snakes. One slip, one spark, and we'd be pink mist. We wired the ignition to the truck's battery. Running the lines through a fuse box, I pulled off a radio. I taped the switch to the dash, right next to the speedometer. When we were done, the truck looked like a porcupine. Metal tubes sticking out the back, wires trailing everywhere. The guys in the platoon came by to look. Some laughed. Some shook their heads and made the sign of the cross. They called it Sullivan's hearse. They thought it would be the death of us. The first test was unauthorized. We drove out to a quarry behind the lines. I aimed at a rock face about 500 yards away. I told everyone to stand back, way back. I sat in the cab, left the door open just in case I had to bail. I flipped the switch for tube number 1. Whoosh! The truck shimmied. The rocket flew true, spiraling slightly, and slammed into the rock face. The explosion was massive. It brought down tons of shale. I sat there grinning like an idiot, the smell of cordite filling the cab. It worked. It actually worked. We had mobile artillery. We had a punch that could keep up with the infantry, but proving it in a quarry is one thing. Taking it into combat is another. The first real mission wasn't an order. It was a necessity. Our company was trying to take a village called Schmidt. The Germans had a POC-40 anti-tank gun hidden in a barn at the edge of town. It had already knocked out 2 Shermans. The road was blocked. The captain was screaming on the radio for artillery, but the batteries were busy elsewhere. He looked at me, desperate. "Sullivan," he said, "can that contraption of yours hit a barn door at 400 yards? I looked at the Dodge, sitting heavy on its springs. "Captain," I said, "I can put it through the window." We moved up at dusk. That's the thing about this setup. It relies on surprise. You don't have the armor of a tank. If they see you, you're dead. We crept along the hedgerows, the engine barely turning over. Miller was spotting for me. "Left, little more left," he whispered. I cranked the handle, the rusty chain squeaking in protest. I lined up the makeshift iron sights I'd welded to the doorframe. The barn was a dark shape against the twilight. I could see the muzzle of the German gun poking out of the hayloft. They were waiting for a tank. They weren't expecting a delivery truck. I didn't fire one. I fired 4. I wanted to be sure. I flipped the toggles in rapid succession. The truck bucked violently. The sound was deafening, a continuous tear in the atmosphere. The rockets crossed the distance in less than a second. The barn simply disintegrated. The roof lifted off, the walls blew out, and a secondary explosion, probably their ammunition, sent a fireball rolling into the sky. We didn't wait around for applause. I threw it in reverse and we got out of there before the debris even hit the ground. When the infantry moved in 10 minutes later, there was nothing left of the anti-tank gun but twisted metal. The guys looked at us differently after that. They didn't call it Sullivan's hearse anymore. They started calling it the problem solver. But the Germans adapt. They always do. You show them a new trick, and they figure out a counter. After a few weeks of us popping up, hitting hard points, and vanishing, they started looking for us. They realized the rockets had a distinct smoke trail. They realized the range was limited. They started setting traps. It was near the Siegfried line that things went sideways. We were overconfident. We'd gotten used to being the hammer. We forgot we were also made of glass. The mission was to suppress a bunker line so the engineers could blow the dragon's teeth obstacles. We rolled into position in a patch of woods. It was a perfect spot, elevated, with a clear line of sight. Too perfect. I should have known. My gut was twisting. That old instinct from hunting back home telling me the wind was wrong. I was lining up the shot when the windshield shattered. No sound of the shot, just the glass exploding inward. Miller screamed, clutching his face. A sniper! We were exposed. Then the machine gun opened up. Bullets hammered the side of the truck, punching through the thin sheet metal like it was paper. I ducked below the dash, grabbing Miller by the collar. "Get down!" I yelled. The rockets were still in the tubes, fully armed. If a bullet hit one of the warheads, there wouldn't be enough of us left to fill a sandwich bag. We were pinned. I could hear the rounds snapping overhead, shredding the upholstery. The engine was dead. A round had probably cracked the block. We couldn't move. We couldn't fire. We were sitting ducks in a truck loaded with high explosives. "Miller, you hit bad?" I asked, checking him. He had glass cuts, blood running into his eyes, but he was alive. "I can't see, Frank. I can't see." He was panicking. I had to make a choice. We could bail out and crawl for the ditch, leaving the truck. But if the Germans captured it, they'd turn it on us. Or worse, they'd see exactly how we built it. I looked at the switch panel. The wires were cut by a bullet. The firing circuit was dead. We were sitting on a dud. I grabbed my Thompson from the floorboard. "We're going," I told Miller. "Grab my belt." I kicked the door open and we rolled into the mud. The machine gun chewed up the ground where we'd been a second before. We crawled, bellies scraping the frozen earth, dragging ourselves toward a drainage culvert 20 yards back. It felt like 20 miles. Every inch was a struggle. I could hear the German voices now. They were moving in. They wanted the truck. We made it to the culvert and slid in, gasping for air. The water was freezing, soaking our uniforms instantly. I looked back. I could see gray uniforms moving through the trees, approaching the Dodge. They were cautious, rifles up. One of them, an officer, approached the bed of the truck, looking at the rocket tubes. He reached out to touch one. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the Zippo lighter I'd carried since basic training. I also pulled out the flare gun I kept in my webbing. I hadn't told Miller, but I'd rigged a failsafe. A jerry can of gasoline under the seat with a trail of soaked rags leading to the back. It wasn't high-tech, it was desperate, but I couldn't let them take it. "Cover your ears," I whispered to Miller. I cracked the flare gun, loaded a red cartridge, and aimed not at the Germans, but at the puddle of gas leaking from the fuel tank that had been punctured in the firefight. I pulled the trigger. The flare arched lazily, a brilliant red spark against the gray woods. It hit the fuel. The whoosh of the gasoline igniting was immediate. The Germans shouted, scrambling back, but it was too late. The fire licked up the side of the truck, heating the rocket motors. These weren't electrically fired anymore. They were cooking off. Cook-off is a terrifying thing. The propellant ignites from the heat, but without the electronic guidance, it's chaotic. The first rocket fired into the ground, flipping the truck onto its side. The second spun wildly into the trees, taking out a pine tree that crushed 2 of the German soldiers. The third one went straight into the cluster of the enemy squad. The explosion shook the ground beneath us in the culvert. It was a chain reaction now. The remaining rockets detonated sympathetically. The truck vanished in a white-hot sphere of destruction. Metal shrapnel rained down on the forest for a full minute. When the smoke cleared, there was no truck. There were no Germans, just a smoking crater and the silence of the winter woods. I looked at Miller. He was wiping blood and mud from his face, looking at the devastation. "Did we win?" he asked, his voice trembling. "We survived," I said. "That's the only way you win in this war." We walked back to our lines that night, cold, wet, and weaponless. The captain was furious about the loss of the truck until he heard the report from the forward observers. They said it looked like the wrath of God had come down on that patch of woods. We got a commendation. I got a new truck. And we started building version 2. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. Version 2 was different. We learned. We armored the cab with steel plates cut from a disabled half-track. We moved the firing switches to a handheld box on a long cord so we could fire from a foxhole 10 feet away if we had to. And we added more rockets. Instead of 12, we mounted 16. We were getting closer to the Rhine, and the resistance was getting stiffer. The Germans were fighting for their homeland now. They were desperate, and desperate men fight hard. It was March 1945. We were supporting the push toward the Rhine. The weather had turned slightly, the snow melting into a thick, sucking mud that stopped tanks in their tracks. We were moving with the 9th Armored Division. They were skeptical of my circus wagon, as they called it. To them, if it didn't have tracks and a 76mm gun, it wasn't a weapon. But the terrain was hilly, tight roads, steep embankments. Tanks were targets. My Dodge could scramble up a goat path. The target was a railway tunnel. Intelligence said the Germans were using it to store V-2 rocket components, hiding them from the bombers. The entrance was heavily defended. Flak 88 guns positioned to fire horizontally, direct fire. An 88 is the most terrifying sound in the world. It cracks like a whip, and if you hear the crack, you're already alive because the shell has passed you. We couldn't get air support because the tunnel mouth was deep in a ravine. The tanks couldn't get an angle without exposing themselves to the 88s. The colonel called me up. He was a hard man, eyes like flint. "Sullivan," he said, pointing at the map, "I need you to flank them. Go up this ridge. It's too steep for armor, but your goat truck might make it. Get an angle down into the ravine and flush them out." It was a suicide mission. The ridge was exposed rock. If they saw us, we'd be swatted like a fly. But I looked at the guys in the unit. Tired, dirty faces. They were stuck here until that tunnel was cleared. "We'll do it, sir," I said. We stripped the truck of everything non-essential. Spare tire, tools, extra gas, all gone. We needed to be light. Tex was driving now, a kid from Dallas who drove like he had a death wish. Miller was back on the rockets, patched up and eager for payback. We started the climb at 0400. The engine whined, the tires slipping on the wet slate. I walked alongside for the tricky parts, guiding Tex with hand signals. One slip, and the truck would tumble 300 feet into the gorge. We reached the crest just as the sun was breaking. The fog was lifting from the valley floor. Below us, about 600 yards down, was the tunnel mouth. I could see the 88 crews having breakfast, the steam rising from their coffee. They were watching the road, not the cliff above them. We were in a perfect enfilade position. I set up the firing box. We angled the rack down. This was tricky. If we angled too low, the rockets would slide out of the tubes. We had to use friction tape to hold them in until the motor ignited. "Target-rich environment," Tex whispered, chewing on a matchstick. He was right. There were ammo trucks, the guns, and infantry bunched up. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of wet stone and morning frost. "All tubes," I said. "Ripple fire." I pressed the button. The mountain shook. 16 rockets. 16 trails of fire screaming down from the heavens. To the Germans below, it must have looked like dragons were spitting fire from the cliffs. The impact was catastrophic. The rockets saturated the ravine. One hit an ammo truck, which vaporized, taking the 88 crew with it. Another flew directly into the tunnel mouth, exploding inside. A plume of dust and smoke shot out like a cannon blast. We didn't stay to watch. We were already moving, reversing back down the slope before the smoke cleared. But we heard it. The secondary explosions. The chaos. We had broken the deadlock. By noon, our tanks were rolling past the tunnel, the crews waving at us as we sat by the road, scraping mud off the Dodge. But the war wasn't just about blowing things up. It was about the moments in between. The moments where you remembered you were human. There was a night in April, deep in Germany. We were billeted in a small village we'd taken without a fight. The civilians were terrified, hiding in cellars. My truck was parked in a barn, covered in hay to hide it from spotter planes. I was doing maintenance on the wiring, my soldering iron glowing in the dim light. I heard a noise, a rustle in the hay. I spun around, my .45 drawn. "Rouse!" I shouted. A small shape emerged. It was a boy, maybe 10 years old. He was skinny, wearing clothes that were too big for him. He stared at the rockets, then at me. He wasn't scared. He was curious. He pointed at the rocket tubes and made a whoosh sound with his mouth. I lowered the gun. He reminded me of my little brother back home. I motioned him closer. He came, cautious. I showed him the wiring. I showed him how the solenoid worked. He didn't speak English, and my German was limited to hands up and surrender. But mechanics is a universal language. I showed him how to strip a wire. He watched, fascinated. For an hour, we weren't enemies. We were just two people interested in how things worked. I gave him a chocolate bar from my rations. He broke it in half and offered the other half back to me. That kid, he probably grew up to be an engineer, or maybe he didn't grow up at all. You never know in war. But for that hour, the rockets weren't weapons of death. They were just machines. That moment stuck with me. It made me realize that the ingenuity we were using to kill each other could have been used to build things. Amazing things. We were taking the most advanced technology of our time, rocketry, and using it to blast farmhouses. It felt like a waste, a necessary waste, but a waste nonetheless. As we pushed deeper into Germany, the resistance crumbled, but the fanatics remained. The SS. They were the ones who wouldn't quit. We encountered a unit of them near the Elbe River. They were dug into a cemetery, using the headstones for cover. It was grotesque, fighting among the dead. We couldn't use artillery out of respect for the church nearby, so the infantry was going in close. It was a meat grinder. The lieutenant called me. "Frank, can you do a precision shot? Just the center of the graveyard. Avoid the church." Precision? With unguided aircraft rockets welded to a truck? It was a tall order. But I knew if I didn't try, more of our boys would die trying to clear those graves. We moved the truck into a side street. The angle was tight. I had to thread the needle between two buildings. I calculated the trajectory on a notepad, doing the math in my head. Velocity, drop, distance. I adjusted the crank. 1 click up, 2 clicks right. I only loaded 4 rockets. I couldn't risk a stray. "Clear backblast!" I yelled. I fired. The rockets screamed down the street, clearing the rooftops by inches. They impacted dead center of the cemetery. The explosions threw dirt and stone into the air. The firing from the SS stopped. When our guys moved in, the fight was over. The church was untouched. I leaned against the fender of the truck, my hands shaking uncontrollably. It wasn't the fear of death. It was the fear of being wrong, the fear of hitting something or someone I didn't mean to. That responsibility weighs heavier than any pack. The end of the war found us in Czechoslovakia. We were miles ahead of the main force, scouting. We ran into a convoy of German trucks heading west, trying to surrender to us rather than the Russians. When they saw my truck with the rocket tubes bristling over the cab, they stopped. A German major got out, walked over, and looked at the rig. He was an older man, tired, defeated. He looked at the crude welds, the taped wires, the bicycle chain elevation gear. He laughed, a dry, humorless laugh. "American technology," he said in perfect English. "We build Tigers and V2s. You build this." He gestured to the Dodge. "And yet, you are here, and we are finished." He handed me his pistol. "But first, it is the triumph of the mechanic over the engineer," he said. I took the pistol. I looked at my truck. It was battered, covered in mud, the paint scarred by shrapnel. But it was still running. It was still fighting. "It's just a truck, Mac," I said. "Just a truck." When the news came that it was over, VE Day, we didn't cheer. We didn't throw our helmets in the air. We just sat there by the side of the road and smoked. I looked at the rocket tubes. They looked different now. Yesterday, they were my lifeline. Today, they were just scrap metal. I got my torch out that afternoon. I started cutting them off. The other guys watched me. "What are you doing, Frank?" Miller asked. "War's over," I said. "This is a farm truck again." I cut the welds. I stripped the wiring. I threw the launch tubes into a ditch. I wanted to leave it all there. The noise, the fire, the fear. I wanted to drive that Dodge back to Kansas and use it to haul hay. Of course, the Army didn't let me keep the truck, but I kept the memory. Coming home was the hardest part. You go from being a guy who builds rocket launchers in barns to a guy who fixes toasters and changes oil. People ask you what you did in the war. If you tell them the truth, they look at you like you're telling a tall tale. "You put airplane rockets on a truck," they say. "Sure, Frank. And I flew to the moon." So you stop telling them. You keep it to yourself. You just nod and say, "I was in the motor pool," which technically wasn't a lie. But at night sometimes I can still smell the ozone. I can feel the heat on my face. I can see the red tracers arcing into the dark. I think about Miller and Tex and the kid in the barn. I think about the German major, the triumph of the mechanic. We won the war not because we had better tanks. Ours were worse, not because we had better guns. We won because we could fix things. We could adapt. We could take a broken situation and weld it into a solution. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I'm an old man now. My hands shake too much to hold a welding torch. But I look at the world today. with all its technology, all its precision, and I wonder if we've lost that spirit. The spirit of making do. The spirit of the silent thunder. We didn't wait for permission. We didn't wait for the factory to build us the perfect weapon. We built it ourselves, in the mud, in the dark, because we had to. That's what I want you to take from this. Not the explosions, not the killing, but the idea that when your back is against the wall, when the manual says impossible, you throw the manual away. You look at what you have, a wrench, a wire, a broken truck, and you make it work. You survive. The war took a lot from me. It took my youth. It took my hearing in my left ear. It took friends I'll never see again. But it gave me one thing. It gave me the knowledge that there is no problem that can't be solved if you're willing to get your hands dirty and take a risk. I never went back to Germany. I didn't want to see the places I destroyed. I prefer to remember them as lines on a map, problems to be solved. But I hope that boy in the barn made it. I hope he used that curiosity to build something beautiful, something that flies to the stars instead of crashing into a hillside. Thank you for listening to an old mechanic's rambling. It's been a long time since I thought about the silent thunder. It feels good to let it out, to let the smoke finally clear. Take care of yourselves. And remember, keep your powder dry and your welding torch handy. You never know when you might need to build a miracle. I realized after I finished that last tape that I made it sound too clean. I skipped over the grit. I told you about the victories, about the problem solver working like a charm, but I didn't tell you about the Ardennes. I didn't tell you about the time the silent thunder almost cost me my soul. If we're going to do this, if I'm going to put this all on record for the first time in 70 years, I need to tell you about the White Hell. December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge. The history books talk about the strategy, the maps, the movement of divisions. They don't tell you what it's like to try and solder a broken wire when it's 10 degrees below zero, and your fingers are so numb they feel like sausages made of wood. The fluid in the hydraulic lines turned to jelly. The grease in the wheel bearings was like wax. And the rockets didn't like the cold any more than we did. The propellant grain inside the motor tubes would get brittle. If it cracked, you didn't get a smooth burn. You got a bomb attached to the bed of your truck. We were parked on a ridge overlooking a crossroads near St. Vith. We'd been awake for 3 days. The Germans were pouring through the gap, desperate, hungry, and heavily armored. We were the stopgap. Me, Miller, Tex, and 16 unstable rockets freezing in the back of a Dodge. The fog was so thick you could chew it. It muffled everything. You couldn't hear a tank engine until it was 50 yards away. That's a terrifying thing. Silence in a war zone. It means you're blind and deaf. I was huddled under a canvas tarp in the back, trying to keep the firing box dry. Condensation was the enemy. One short circuit, and we could fire a rocket into the back of our own cab, or worse, fail to fire when a Tiger tank was staring us down. Tex was in the driver's seat, engine idling to keep the battery charged. We couldn't turn it off. If we did, we'd never get it started again. The exhaust fumes were leaking into the cab, making us all lightheaded, but it was better than freezing to death. Movement, Miller whispered. He was on the hood with binoculars, looking like a snowman with a helmet. Sound, heavy, tracks. I scrambled up, my boots slipping on the icy metal of the truck bed. I checked the leads. Green light on the test circuit. Good. I climbed into the cab. What do you see? I asked. Nothing yet, Miller said, his voice tight. But I can feel it. The ground is shaking. He was right. The coffee in the tin cup on the dashboard was rippling. Panzers and big ones. We were supposed to be hidden, an ambush predator. But the snow had stopped falling, and the gray sky was brightening. If they spotted the silhouette of the rack, we were finished. A 75mm high-explosive shell would turn us into a memory before I could flip the first toggle. Then, the gray shape emerged from the fog. A panther. Sloped armor, long gun, looking like a prehistoric beast hunting for a meal. It was followed by a half-track full of infantry. They were heading right for the crossroads we were guarding. Behind us, a platoon of the 106th Infantry was digging in, praying for a miracle. We were the miracle. A pathetic, shivering miracle. Range? I asked. 300 yards. Closing, Miller said. I adjusted the crank. The chain was stiff with ice. I had to force it, gritting my teeth, praying the links wouldn't snap. Crack. The ice broke loose. The rack tilted down. I aimed for the road just in front of the tank. The idea wasn't to penetrate the frontal armor. Our rockets couldn't do that reliably. The idea was to blow the tracks off, immobilize it, and let the chaos handle the rest. Wait for it, I muttered. Wait for the broadside. The Panther turned, its turret rotating toward the farmhouse where our infantry was hiding. It was going to fire. Now! I screamed. I hit the switch for the outer pair of rockets. Click. Nothing. No whoosh. No fire. Just the sickening sound of a solenoid clicking in the cold. A misfire. Damn it! I slammed the box against the dash. Contacts are frozen! The Panther fired. The farmhouse exploded in a shower of brick and timber. I could hear screams. We were useless. I had 16 rockets and a frozen switch. I looked at the wires running out the window to the rack. I grabbed my pliers from my belt. Tex, keep her steady! I yelled. I'm going out back. Frank, are you crazy? Tex shouted. I didn't answer. I kicked the door open and climbed into the bed of the truck, fully exposed. The Germans were 200 yards away now. The machine gunner on the Panther saw me. Bullets started zipping past, thwack, thwack, thwack against the armor plate we'd welded on. I crawled on my belly across the ice-slicked steel floor to the junction box at the base of the rocket tubes. The insulation on the main wire had cracked. The cold had shattered the rubber. It was shorting out against the metal frame. I didn't have tape. I didn't have time to splice it. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the bare copper of the firing line in my left hand and the ground wire in my right hand. I was going to complete the circuit manually. I looked at the tank. It was swiveling toward us. The black eye of the muzzle looked enormous. Fire! I screamed at myself. I touched the wires together. The shock hit me first. 12 volts isn't much, but when you're wet and holding onto a steel truck frame, it bites. But the current flowed. The igniters in the rockets flared. Because I was bypassing the selector switch, I didn't fire two. I fired the whole left bank.
8 rockets. The heat was instantaneous. It singed my eyebrows and knocked the wind out of me. The backblast threw me against the tailgate, but I saw them go. 8 trails of fire screaming toward the Panther. It was overkill.
It was a sledgehammer swatting a fly. The impact was blinding. The rockets hit the tank, the road, the half-track, and the trees behind them simultaneously. The Panther didn't just stop, it was shoved sideways by the concussion. The turret was blown clean off the ring. The half-track was flipped upside down. I lay there in the truck bed, smoke curling around me. My hands burned, my ears ringing. I started laughing. It was a manic, terrified laugh. We were alive. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. That misfire changed things for me. It made me realize that ingenuity wasn't enough. You needed reliability. Back in Kansas, if a tractor broke down, you lost a day of harvest. Here, if the truck broke down, you lost your life. I became obsessed with the wiring. Every night, no matter how tired I was, I stripped the system down. I started using wax to seal the connections. Melting candles I scrounged from bombed-out churches over the terminal posts to waterproof them. The guys thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was, but the cold wasn't the only enemy. The terrain in the Ardennes was a nightmare. Steep, icy hills, narrow logging trails. We were supporting the 82nd Airborne for a while near the Somme River. These guys were tough, elite paratroopers, but they lacked heavy weapons. They loved the silent thunder because we could get into places the tanks couldn't. There was a mission near a village called Chenu. The Germans had a flak wagon, a Wirbelwind. That's a Panzer chassis with 4 20mm cannons mounted in a turret. It's a meat chopper. It was suppressing an entire company of paratroopers, chewing up the tree line. Every time a GI raised his head, the quad cannons would turn the tree into sawdust. We came up a ravine on the flank. The snow was deep, up to the axles. Tex was fighting the wheel, the Dodge sliding toward the drop-off with every yard. Easy, Tex, easy, I was guiding him. Don't spin the tires. Let them bite. We got to a position about 400 yards out. We were looking up at the German position. This was bad geometry. Rockets drop. Firing uphill means you have to aim significantly higher, and the margin for error is razor thin. If we fell short, we'd hit the paratroopers. If we went long, we'd miss the flak wagon and give away our position to a weapon that fired 800 rounds a minute. I got out and used a protractor and a plumb line to measure the angle of the truck bed. 14 degrees slope, I muttered. Target is elevation +6. I did the math on my glove. I had to tilt the rack almost to its limit. Miller, I need you to confirm the friendly line, I said. Miller was on the radio. They're popping smoke. Blue smoke is friendly. Red smoke is enemy. We watched. A plume of blue smoke drifted up from the woods on the left. A plume of red from the ridge on the right. The gap between them was barely 50 yards. That's a tight window for unguided rockets made in a barn. Frank, Miller said, looking at me, if we hit the 82nd, they will kill us. Literally. Those paratroopers don't play. We won't hit them, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I adjusted the elevation. I double-checked the wax seals on the wires. I took a deep breath of the freezing air. It smelled of pine and cordite. "Firing 2, ranging shot," I said. I flipped the switch. Whoosh, whoosh. The rockets arched up, fighting gravity. They looked slow, agonizingly slow. I watched them apex and start to fall. They drifted slightly right in the wind. They hit the ridge. Crump, crump. "Short," Miller yelled. 50 yards short. You almost clipped the blue smoke." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Wind is stronger up there," I said. Correcting left 2 degrees. Elevation up 1 degree. I cranked the handle. It was the hardest turn of my life. I was gambling with the lives of American boys. "Fire for effect," I whispered. "God help us." I unleashed the remaining 10 rockets. The truck rocked violently, sliding backward in the snow from the recoil. The sky filled with smoke trails. I held my breath. The salvo bracketed the red smoke. The explosions merged into one continuous roar. We saw the turret of the whirlwind fly into the air, spinning like a tossed coin. The firing stopped. A moment later, the radio crackled. "Good shooting, Tex. You cleared the way. Beers are on us." I slumped in the seat. "Don't call me Tex," I whispered to no one. I looked at my hands. They were shaking so bad I couldn't light a cigarette. That was the stress of the silent thunder. It wasn't the combat, it was the precision. We were using a sledgehammer to do surgery. After the bulge, things changed. The army started to take notice. Not just the local commanders, but the brass. A colonel from Ordnance came to inspect the truck. He was a tall man with clean boots. Too clean. He walked around the Dodge, taking notes on a clipboard. He looked at the welding, the wiring, the scavenged sites. "Sergeant Sullivan," he said, "this is unauthorized modification of government property." "Yes, sir," I said, standing at attention. "It is also a safety hazard." "The suspension is overloaded. The electrical system is non-standard. The rockets are not cleared for ground launch." "Yes, sir." He paused, looking at the kill marks I'd painted on the door. 5 tanks, 3 bunkers, 2 half-tracks, and the whirlwind. "However," he continued, closing his clipboard, "it appears to be effective. I'm authorizing a refit. You need heavier springs, and for God's sake, let the signal corps wire this thing properly. I don't want you blowing yourself up before you get to Berlin." That was the only compliment I ever got from Ordnance. They sent us to a depot in Belgium for a week. We got a new truck, a fresher WC-52. They reinforced the frame. They gave us proper aviation switches. It felt like driving a Cadillac compared to the death trap we'd built. But I missed the old truck. It had character. It had my sweat in the metal. We rejoined the unit for the push to the Rhine. This was the big one, crossing the river into the heart of Germany. The enemy knew it was the end, but that just made them more dangerous, like a wounded animal cornered in a burrow. I remember a specific town near the river, Remagen. The bridge was the prize, the Ludendorff Bridge. We were rushing to get there before they blew it. The traffic on the roads was insane. Tanks, trucks, jeeps, thousands of men. We were stuck in a jam, engines overheating. A Messerschmitt Me 262, the jet fighter, screamed over us. You've never heard a sound like that. It doesn't roar like a prop plane. It shrieks. It sounds like the sky is ripping open. It dropped a bomb on the column ahead of us. Chaos. Men diving into ditches. I looked up. The jet was circling back for a strafing run. We were sitting ducks. My rockets were ground attack weapons. They weren't anti-aircraft, but I was angry. I was tired of being strafed. I was tired of hiding. "Miller, crank it up, all the way up!" I yelled. "You can't hit a jet with a rocket, Frank," Miller shouted. "It's moving 400 miles an hour. I don't want to hit him. I want to scare him." Miller cranked the rack until it was pointing almost straight up. The jet was coming in low, lining up on the road. I waited until I saw the nose sparkle. Cannon fire. "Eat this!" I slammed the fire button. I fired all 16 rockets in a single ripple. They shot straight up into the air, creating a curtain of fire and smoke directly in the path of the jet. The German pilot must have panicked. He saw a wall of explosions appearing in front of him. He yanked the stick back. The jet pulled up violently, stalling. He banked hard to the left, his wingtip missing the church steeple by feet. He aborted the run. He didn't come back. The infantry guys around us were cheering. We didn't hit him, but we made him flinch. Sometimes, that's all you need. That night, a grunt from the 9th Armored walked up to the truck. He handed me a bottle of wine he'd liberated. "Thanks for the fireworks show, Sarge," he said. I thought I was dead. "Me too, kid," I said. "Me too. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. Crossing the Rhine was a moment I'll never forget. The bridge at Remagen was captured intact, but it was damaged. We drove across it under artillery fire. Shells were splashing in the water below, sending geysers of gray slime over the roadway. The bridge groaned and creaked. It felt like it was alive, suffering. I drove the Dodge, my knuckles white on the wheel. "Don't look down," I told myself. "Just keep moving." Once we were on the East Bank, we were in uncharted territory. The rules changed. We weren't liberating anymore. We were conquering. The civilians looked at us with fear, not joy. White sheets hung from every window. It was eerie. We were tasked with clearing out the pockets of resistance in the industrial Ruhr Valley. This was urban combat. Factories, rail yards, warehouses. A sniper's paradise. The silent thunder was less useful here. You can't fire a barrage of rockets in a narrow street without bringing a building down on your own head. We had to be surgical. I developed a new technique. Direct fire. Instead of arcing the rockets, we'd drive the truck right up to the target, point-blank range, maybe 50 yards, turn the truck sideways, and fire a single rocket straight into a window or a doorway. It was dangerous. We were exposing ourselves to small arms fire. One afternoon, we were pinned down by a machine gun nest located on the 3rd floor of a steel mill. The infantry couldn't get close. The ricochets were flying everywhere. The captain waved me up. "Sullivan, can you put one in that 3rd window? The one with the sandbags?" I looked at the building. It was a fortress of brick and iron. "I can try, Cap, but I need cover to get into position." The captain organized a base of fire. 2 squads opened up with bars and M1s to keep the German heads down. Under that curtain of lead, I drove the Dodge out of the alley and into the middle of the street. Miller jumped out and cranked the elevation down to 0. "Flat trajectory!" he yelled. I lined up the truck. I was looking through the open door, sighting along the top of the rocket tube. I could see the muzzle flash of the German gun. I fired 1 rocket. At that range, the rocket motor hadn't even finished burning when it hit. The impact blew the entire corner of the building out. Bricks rained down like hail. The machine gun fell silent. I threw the truck in reverse and backed into the alley just as a sniper bullet cracked the side mirror. We sat there, breathing hard, listening to the dust settle. That's when I noticed my hand. I was bleeding. A piece of brick spalling had flown into the cab and sliced my forearm. It wasn't deep, but it was messy. Miller looked at it. "Purple Heart for Frank," he joked. "I don't want a medal," I said, wrapping a rag around it. "I want to go home." That was the feeling in the spring of '45. We were winning, but we were exhausted. We were running on fumes. The adrenaline of the early days was gone, replaced by a dull dread that you'd be the last man to die in a war that was already decided. We started seeing things that haunt me. The labor camps. I won't describe them in detail. You've seen the newsreels. But the smell is something film can't capture. It smells like despair. We used the truck to haul water and food to the survivors. It felt strange to use a machine built for destruction to carry milk and bread. But it was the best mission we ever flew. I remember an old man, skin and bones, touching the rocket tubes. He asked in broken German what they were. "Thunder," I told him. "Thunder to clear the storm." He nodded, tears in his eyes. I don't know if he understood, but he squeezed my hand. That hand squeeze meant more to me than the commendation letter from the general. By May, we were deep in Bavaria. The landscape was beautiful. Green rolling hills, mountains in the distance. It was hard to believe there was a war on, but the SS were retreating into the Alpine Redoubt. They were planning to fight to the last man. We were on a mountain road scouting ahead. We came around a bend and saw a roadblock. A tree felled across the road, defended by a group of young boys. Hitler Youth. They couldn't have been more than 14. They had Panzerfausts and rifles that were too big for them. I stopped the truck. I didn't want to fire. I looked at Miller. "They're kids, Frank," he said. "Just kids." I stood up in the cab, exposing myself. "Go home!" I shouted in English, waving my arm. "The war is over! Go to your mothers!" One of the boys raised his rifle. He was shaking. He aimed at me. I had my hand on the firing box. I could vaporize them in a second. 16 rockets against a log and 5 kids. It would be over instantly. My thumb hovered over the button. It was the hardest decision of my life. Self-preservation screamed, "Fire!" Morality whispered, "Don't." The boy fired. The bullet hit the windshield frame inches from my head. I didn't flinch. I just stared at him. I didn't press the button. I couldn't. Then, an older German soldier, an NCO with a bandaged head, stepped out of the woods. He grabbed the boy's rifle and pushed it down. He looked at me, then at the rocket truck. He saw that I hadn't fired. He understood. He shouted something at the boys. They lowered their weapons. Slowly, one by one, They dropped them on the road and ran into the forest. The NCO stood there for a moment, gave me a sharp nod, and followed them. I sat down, my legs turning to jelly. "Jesus, Frank," Miller exhaled. "You took a hell of a chance." "I know," I said, "but I'm done killing. I'm just done. That was the last time we armed the system. We drove the rest of the way to the Austrian border with the safety plugs installed. When the surrender was announced, I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. Pure, unadulterated relief. The Silent Thunder was parked in a field near Salzburg. We took a picture in front of it. Me, Miller, Tex. We looked like hobos. Dirty, unshaven, eyes hollow. But we were alive. The truck was battered. The suspension was shot. The wiring was a mess of tape and wax. But it had carried us through the fire. I told you in the last tape that I cut the tubes off. That's true. But before I did, I took one of the toggle switches. Just one. I put it in my pocket. I still have it. It sits on my workbench in the garage. Sometimes when I'm fixing a lawnmower or tinkering with a toaster, I look at that switch. It reminds me of the cold in the Ardennes. It reminds me of the heat of the backblast. It reminds me of the sound of tearing canvas. But mostly, it reminds me of the responsibility. The power to destroy is easy to build. The wisdom to know when not to use it. That takes a lifetime to learn. I hope these stories give you some idea of what it was like. Not the Hollywood version, the real version. The rust, the frozen wires, the fear, and the brotherhood. I'm tired now. Talking about this takes it out of me. But I'm glad I did. Maybe someone out there, some young mechanic or engineer, will hear this and realize that the machine is only as good as the man behind it. Thanks for listening. This is Frank Sullivan, signing off. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten.